This is the Shoulda Bet More podcast, presented by Goal Boys Network. Here's your host, Will Hill.
Welcome to the Shoulda Bet More podcast, presented by Goal Boys. Coming up on the show, Dave Ross of Easton will join us. We will discuss Mets-Dodgers Game 6. This is how we're going to break the show down. Segment 1 will be the early games, Sunday NFL, and then I'll talk Yankees. And then segment 2, we will discuss Mets and Dodgers as it's about to take place right now. So excited to talk to Dave. And I will start here with the football before I get to the Yankees, though, and the early games. The big one was Lions-Vikings, because if you look at the Vikings schedule, and I've talked about this in past weeks, their schedule and their record, if they had beaten the Lions on Sunday, they were a monster favorite to be the 1 seed. And this was a good game, a back and forth game. And this was the story of the early games, where Minnesota's up 10-0 before you can blink. They get a 3-and-out. They stop a fake punt. And then they're down 11. It's just a back and forth game. They get a scoop. They get a fumble return, touchdown, up 1, miss the 2-point conversion, which is always dicey being up 1. But then they get the ball back, and hey, a couple first downs wins the game. They run it, they throw it. And once you're up 1 and you punt it back, you're in a dome, you're in against a offense that's moving the ball well. And Goff was tremendous. Goff's an underrated player. I've said this before. Goff is underrated. I think there's this reputation around him that he's soft, California kid. McVay, carried him. He can't play in cold, which he can't. He does struggle in cold. That is fair. That is true. But Goff was excellent today. And if I was Minnesota, they had 4th and 4, slightly in their own territory. I would have just gone for it, because if you get it, obviously you're in great shape. And if you don't get it, at least Detroit's on a short field. It lined up perfectly for Detroit. And O'Connell's a sharp coach. I'm surprised he didn't think of this, where and the Fox announcers were questioning Campbell. Man, they're taking their time. They were taking their time for a reason. They had 2:40 left. They had 2 timeouts. They're indoors. They're down a point. They were in no hurry, and they milked the clock perfectly. At least if you're Minnesota, if you go for it and you don't get it, it's going to be harder to milk the clock in that way. So I thought Minnesota, they got a little conservative, run, pass. They only give themselves 1 chance to move the chains with the throw. And that's a tough loss for Minnesota, because they had a chance to get a stranglehold on the division. Now, look, that was a valiant game, and you could say maybe they didn't deserve to win because they got the fumble return for a touchdown in Detroit. I thought for the better part of the day was the better team, and it felt like Minnesota was going to steal one. But my goodness, that's a tough one for Minnesota. Detroit now in good shape here to look, a long way to go, but they're going to be the favorite here to win the division. Goff is going to start to get some MVP buzz, because he's played tremendously well. He's got a good offensive line, he's got good weapons, but he made a bunch of good throws today. I was very impressed with Goff. Packers beat the Texans. That was a good game, back and forth game as well. Texans still in good shape to win the South. Packers needed to kind of hang with the Vikings and the Lions. Other than that, early on, Bengals beat the Browns. Watson gets hurt. It looks like he's done. Not that that affects their season or anything, but the Bengals now at least back within shouting distance in this AFC North. They've strung a couple wins together as the Giants. Then they beat the Browns today. So the Bengals now back in the mix. At least, within shouting distance of some of these teams. Bills crushed the Titans. Philly buries the Giants. So the sentiment that, hey, the Giants are underrated, they're under the radar. Yeah, well, maybe not so much, because the Giants were awful today. On Philly, when they have all their guys, I know Sirianni, you don't always love his antics on the sideline. Their defense is a question, but when they have Hurts, Barkley, those receivers, A.J. Brown, Devontae Smith with Goddard, I mean, that's a hell of an offensive football team. So I think people may be kicking dirt on Philly a little too early here. So good win for Philly. Those were the big stories, at least of the early games. And I'll talk about the later games with Dave coming up. But let's get to the Yankees before we get to Dave, because give him credit. I've been hard on them. I've been fairly hard on them, not being aggressive in free agency. They've come up short a million times, and they've had a fair reputation of their offense disappears in the playoffs. This year was not the case. Stanton will get cheered the rest of his life when he goes to Yankee Stadium for Old Timers Day. He is a made man. Torres stepped up. Guys, Yankee fans don't even like Torres. Stanton is hot and cold with Yankee fans. Verdugo played a good left field, put the bat on the ball. Rizzo came up with some hits. It was a very good team effort. And boy, games 3, 4, and 5 in Cleveland were about as good as it gets, man. Game 3 was a classic. Game 4 wasn't far behind. And by the way, the Yankees got a breaking game for that Friday night game, because they're up 2 runs in the 9th inning after what was just a crazy back and forth game. And Lane Thomas, I think, was the leadoff hitter for Cleveland. Full count. That full count pitch was not only down, it was outside. And then the next 2 guys got on base. So, I mean, the Yankees were very fortunate. And look, they were just I think they were due for one of these balls to bounce their way. They go back to the World Series, and you could sense the relief. You could sense the accomplishment because anyone's going to feel accomplishment when they go to the World Series. But this is a Yankee team where if you're of a certain age, going to the World Series became like your birthright. Like this was just a annual routine. 96, 98, 99, 2000, 2001, 2003, 5 times in 7 years. So for them to go 15 years without winning it, 15 years without getting there, you could tell the relief for them to break through. And look, they've had some tough losses in this round against Houston 3 times. I mean, 17, 19, and then a couple years ago when they got swept. They've lost their last 5 ALCS, so they were kind of due for the ball to bounce their way. And give them credit. I mean, they rallied back. I thought once they got behind 2-0 Saturday, and that was another tremendous game Saturday, I thought, all right, maybe, you know what, you go back to Yankee Stadium and try to win it with Cole. But Stanton again hits a monster homer, and Soto with an iconic 3-run homer to send the New York Yankees to the World Series. So good for them. They answered a lot of questions. Now, if you lose in the World Series, is it going to be viewed as success? No. I mean, you're still the Yankees, and if you don't win the World Series, not really. But there is something accomplished by getting there. And as long as they don't completely embarrass themselves, you can at least check that. Like, you got through this plateau. This is a round where you've stubbed your toe a lot these last few years, and the Yankees move on in the World Series. They danced through the raindrops. I mean, the relief pitching was spotty. I mean, they've got plenty of issues, but we talked about it all year where it's just like the American League is not that good. I think the AL Central, here's what I don't think enough people discuss. The fact that the White Sox were so bad helped the Tigers, the Royals. Cleveland actually didn't play that well against the White Sox, but these Tigers and Royals teams, like the Royals were 12-1 against the White Sox, under 500 against everyone else. The Tigers were 10-3 against the White Sox, basically a 500 team against everyone else. They beat up on the White Sox to get these teams in. So it was a weak bracket. Once Houston got out, once Baltimore got out, you felt that, hey, this was a ready-made path here for the Yankees to advance to the World Series, and they did. They took care of business. And, there were stressful moments. There were a lot of stressful moments, but when you look back, you know what? They beat the Royals 3-1, and they beat Cleveland 4-1. So it doesn't seem as stressful on paper as it did in reality, but good for the Yankees. We'll see what happens here in the World Series. So football, baseball, what a time of the year. We will talk all of that next with Dave Ross. This is Shoulda Bet More podcast. All right, we are back. Shoulda Bet More podcast. We have a World Series. It's going to be the Yankees and the Dodgers, and that means the Mets magic carpet ride is over. A great season, a great run, but it is no longer. And to discuss that from VSiN, a very sad Dave Ross. Dave, what's going on, man? Great run. The Brewers series, the Braves doubleheader, the Philly series, 11 games under 500. I know it's disappointing, but you got to be able to hang your head and move on and feel like you're in good shape going forward. How are you doing tonight?
Not good. Not good, Will. I want to be good. I want to take the positives. You're right. You and I were texting throughout the game. We kind of felt like, after Manaea really struggled early, you had to really bank on Manaea being great tonight. He just wasn't in the game where he had to be great. But you're right. When you go glass half full and you look at what the Mets actually accomplished, I think you say it's actually incredible to think they were 2 wins away from the World Series. But it stings tonight. The group text, it feels like a divorce. Like you say goodbye to the boys that you text with every day for, 162 and then throughout the playoffs. And that's the way it is in a clubhouse. And like, it's not going to be the same team next year. There's no guarantee that the Mets are going to, be able to grow from this and be better than this next year and get to the World Series. There's just, as you well know, there's just every year is different. Injuries, personalities, you never know what it could be. So yes, in the short term, it was a wildly successful season. In the long term, you hope that you can kind of bottle that magic, but it did feel like magic to a degree. And I don't know that we can just say, yeah, the Mets are going to be right back in the playoffs next year.
Yeah, I agree with that. Philly is still really good. Atlanta gets Acuna back. They get Strider back. They're still really good. But first of all, you have a lot of money and you have a well-run organization. It seems like Stearns knows what he's doing. I think they're on the right path. Now, again, that doesn't guarantee anything once you get into the season, once you get in the playoffs, but I do think they're going in the right direction. They're going to have a competitive representative product going forward here.
Yeah, absolutely. And again, you're right. The front office, I mean, it just feels like this is a huge upgrade for Metropolitan fans from years past, right? I mean, we went through the Brody Von Brobro years, and you kind of knew that was going to be a disaster. And, some managerial things didn't work out. You thought you were going to get Beltran. That doesn't work out, and you kind of settle for different guys. And look, I got to be honest with you. I thought maybe you should keep Buck Showalter for another year. No, I think Mendoza has been it's really, you look back 365 and you go, what a great job of pushing buttons on a team that had low expectations. Maybe that helped that they had low expectations. Maybe it helped that they were 11 games under and really everybody just wrote them off. I know we didn't. You and I talked about it all summer long on Visa, and we kind of felt like, they were still, because the middle of the National League was kind of middling, that if they could get in, they could do damage, is exactly what they did. It's going to be fascinating to see what the numbers look like next year in the Mets. Like, I don't know what type of numbers we're going to be to be a playoff team, but the Braves are going to reload. They're going to be healthy. They get Acuna back. Phillies aren't going anywhere. I mean, that NL East is going to be what we thought it would be this year. It's going to be really tough to wade through. And to think that they actually beat out the beat up Braves to get that second spot as the wild card team, I just don't know that we can just bank on that again next year.
Yep, and you got a lot of good pitching performances from Manaea and Severino, like you mentioned. Doesn't mean they're going to be back or you're going to get them again, but we can talk more Mets at a different time because we do have a World Series. Dodgers, Yankees. Dodgers minus 120, minus 125 in some spots. Initial thoughts on this series?
Yeah, I still look at it, and I kind of look at it the way I did the Mets going into the Dodgers series, where I said, well, the Mets are going to have the starting pitching advantage. And I think the Yankees will have the start. I say I think because I think we saw some performances that I don't know that we expected to get out of some of the Dodger pitchers, at least against the Mets in the NLCS. So if they can get like the game one clarity that the Mets saw, that's front end stuff. If you can get Blake, I don't. Trinan's fantastic out of the pen. I mean, that's an elite closer. Get the final 6 outs tonight to close it out. I mean, he is that. I know that Luke's been good for the Yankees, but I think advantage Dodgers in the bullpen, starting pitching, slight advantage to the Yanks, and then boy, I know this is the matchup everybody wanted with the battle of MVPs and Judge against Shohei. It's going to be fascinating to see what Juan Soto's been able to do. Mookie's been that good as well in this postseason run. So you really have maybe the 4 most electrifying offensive players in the postseason, 2 apiece. It's going to be for a Met fan, like, to break it down, I'd have to take the plus money in the Yankees, even though I don't know that I could root for either one of these teams at this point and just sit back and root for my money. And I think it would have to be on the Yanks as small dogs in this one.
Yeah, I don't have a feel yet. It's going to be a great series. I mean, I was rooting for the Mets. But I mean, you got the rivalry, coast to coast, the uniforms, Judge, Soto, throwing Stanton now, Betts, like you said, Freeman's not himself, but Otani. I mean, you can't ask for more star power. This is a great World Series. So I'm excited for it. Sounds like you're leaning towards the Yankees in like 6 or 7, something like that. Yeah,
I think so. And again, you saw Judge start to hit again. And I think that's always the concern now because, these are the brightest stages. These are where your legendary Yankees are made, right? This is where a Reggie Jackson gets made. And again, conversely for the Dodgers, this is where, as great as Shohei is, as great as Judge is, and we look at those guys, and these are perennial MVPs in their respective leagues. Now, I do think if one of those two shines a little bit brighter, that's something you kind of historically we're looking. These are historical players. Like the Mets have good players, they have really good players. Frankie was fantastic. Alonso's been great stories, but these are supremely talented guys, all-timers in Judge and Shohei. And I do think somebody's legacy is going to be made. It's kind of like, Eli against Brady. And you go, well, Eli clearly is not Tom Brady, but Eli made his career with 2 Super Bowl wins against Tom Brady. Somebody's going to be that guy that we go, hey, remember when they went head to head? Yeah, Judge got the better of Shohei, or Shohei got the better of Judge. It's not the apples to apples, of course, because they're not going up against each other, kind of like those quarterbacks weren't. But that's the way we remember it. Like we remember Eli, in air quotes, beating Brady. This would be Judge, in air quotes, beating Shohei, or vice versa.
Yep, going to be a lot of fun. I'm looking forward to it. Starts Friday, so I would think a good competitive long series, and it should be just a great series. What was your biggest takeaway from football today? Take it whatever direction you want to
go. Mike Tomlin knows what the hell he's doing. Look, me, you and I have talked about the Steelers all year, and I did make the bet. I didn't know if it was going to be Justin Fields or Russell Wilson, and I took an 11-1 flyer on the Steelers to win the division. They're still in first place in that division. I know the Ravens still look like the class of that division, but I do think, as good as Justin Fields was, you saw why Mike Tomlin made that change to Russell Wilson. And if you look back at Wilson's numbers last year in Denver, they're pretty good. It's weird. It's a disconnect because you watch Russ play and you go, he's not good. And then you look at the numbers and the non-turnovers and, the better quarterback touchdown to interception ratio. And you go, oh, maybe he's still pretty good. So it's a weird, your eyes might be deceiving you type thing. My biggest takeaway is Tomlin knew exactly why he wanted to make that move. And I think some of that was manifested in that win tonight over the Jets.
Yeah, and the Jets are a disaster. I was wrong. I thought they'd be really good. Their defense isn't as good as I thought. Rodgers has been okay, but not great.
They can't stop the run.
And think about how quickly things changed. They were 2-1. They looked great that Thursday night against the Patriots. Granted, I know it's New England, but they had Denver at home next. Then they had a neutral against Minnesota. And then Steelers. It looked like, hey, there's a path here for them to go like 6-2. With some of these 50-50 games, even half of them go their way. They haven't won a game since. It's really remarkable, and this is falling off the rails now. I don't know. Is Rodgers back next year? Do they bring in just a new coach and try to run it back with Rodgers in this group? It's a mess. It really is.
Well, here's what's interesting. I looked at their win total before this Sunday night game against the Steelers. It was 7.5 juiced heavily, and it was minus $1.75. And I thought, do I want to lay almost $2 on the Jets to get 8 wins? And I did not make the play because I thought they were going to lose to the Steelers with this quarterback change to Russell Wilson. Now I want to see what it drops to. If it gets down to 6.5, now we're going to find out very quickly if Aaron Rodgers is still in it. I mean, you make the move to get Davante Adams. I think we might have a buy low spot. And again, you look at the Jets, the rest of the schedule, you feel like it's manageable, but you're right. You thought that this part was manageable and they haven't managed it. But if you can get it down to 6.5, if this team has any semblance of a pulse, if Rodgers is still a leader in that locker room, if Davante Adams has come over there for the right reasons, I think you might have to look at a buy low spot on the Jets if the juice isn't crazy for over 6.5. And if you get a 6, you get a 6, I'll lay the juice and play that knowing a 6 gets back my money.
I defend Rodgers more than most people. I will say, though, he doesn't seem like a foxhole guy. Things are going poorly.
Right.
I don't know that he's going to rally the troops here. I just don't.
I think that's fair. And I look, if he's got anything, I'm not just talking about this year. I'm talking about left in the tank for his career. You'd want to see some, look, you go back to the end of Favre's career in Minnesota, that guy was fighting, everything he had on a Vikings team, right? So, hey, this is your second team now. This is the Jets. You got a different coach now. You still have your guy Hackett, even though he's upstairs. You got to make this work, Aaron Rodgers. That's what other quarterbacks do. What the other Tom Brady, even when they didn't win the Super Bowl, after winning the Super Bowl, still got the bad Bucs teams to win divisions and get in the postseason. That's the true greatness. If you've got that in you, this team isn't dead. If he's quit, then they are dead. But I got to think that Rodgers still, the legacy, he doesn't want to go out like this. You would hope this Jets team would rally.
Chiefs beat the 49ers. Purdy played terrible, and I'm a Purdy fan, but he was bad today. Do you start to have a little concern here about San Francisco at 3-4?
I have massive concerns about San Francisco. My best play on the board next week is Cowboys +5. I know we're thinking, what? Why would you play that? Look at the receivers. They're walking wounded. The report is Ayuk's going to be done for the year. Debo's dinged up. No CMC. And you saw it today where really it's George Kittle and then good luck. If Mason can't run the football effectively, I mean, who scares you on that offense now? And if Brock Purdy can't game manage the way he did, and look, that's not a knock on Brock Purdy, but is he an elevator? Well, you got to elevate with those guys I mentioned not being there. That's the true greatness of a quarterback. So I think there are concerns there. I don't know that they all go to the feet of Brock Purdy, but I look at the Cowboys +5 next week, coming off a bye, and as wounded as they are, and Mike Zimmer's had a full week to get ready for this, I'd be really surprised if you didn't get the Cowboys' best effort out there next week in Santa Clara.
2 Monday night games before we get you out of here. Ravens laying 3.5 at Tampa, total 50. Chargers laying 1.5 against Arizona, who's a very strange team, hard to figure out. Do you like either one of those games?
The only one that I have a lean to here, and it's going to probably end up, I've seen some ones now. I do like the Chargers. And this is a sleepy football team. We've kind of forgotten about them. With a couple early season losses. We saw the bad loss in Pittsburgh early, and Herbert still looks banged up. And they don't look sexy, but I feel like they're starting to turn the corner. The Cardinals were a team early in the year that I thought were going to turn the corner in a really down NFC West. They haven't. They can't stop anybody. They're not running the football at all. And I think Kyler Murray's been okay, but I just don't know if they have enough. I think the defense of the Chargers is going to be clearly the best unit on that field tomorrow night. That's my strongest play. If you find, and I did see some ones popping, money's been coming in on the Cardinals. I'll take that. I'll lay that 1.5 instead of earlier in the week, 2.5. I think you're getting value on the Chargers. I think watch out. I know the Chiefs are still undefeated, the last undefeated team, and they look really strong. I would not necessarily count out LA going forward because they win ugly. They win with defense, kind of like the Steelers, and their defense is going to keep them in every game.
Dave, when we made plans for you to come on, we were hoping we'd be breaking down Game 7 of the NLCS. It didn't break that way, so I feel badly. But like I said, great season. I know you're bummed out, but appreciate you coming on. Let everyone know where they can find you.
You can always find me on X as not the Will Hill knows at DRoss Sports. That's 3 S's in a row. I don't take myself too seriously, so I hope people do the same on that wicked platform. Well, whenever I'm down, there's nobody I'd rather talk to after a brutal 6-game defeat by the Mets than talking to you, my friend. So I appreciate it.
Absolutely. A week from now, 2 weeks from now, you'll feel better, and you guys will feel
yes.
Like, hey, we had a hell of a season. Get ready for next year. So baseball season, it comes quicker than you think. I mean, it's not that long of a turnaround. Dave, appreciate it, man. Thanks for coming on.
Anytime, Will.
All right. Thank you guys for listening. That will do it. We have a World Series, so Yankees and the Dodgers will spend plenty of time on that this week. We'll be back Wednesday. Rate, review, subscribe. See you then.